What is up, diehards? Wes Monell in the building for AWOL Sports, hanging out with Paul Durfee, Drew Lacuesta, Andrew Vargas. We're hanging out today. We're going to talk about the players that have the most to prove next season. We got some quarterbacks on this list, some players at the skill positions, as well as some linemen. We'll mix it up a little bit. We won't stick with just the flashy positions. We'll hit them all. So, quarterback position, one of the most polar players in the league, recently was not put on the NFL top 100 players list for whatever it's worth. Paul, I know you got a lot on your mind here. Share your player with us.
Yeah, so my man, Carson Wentz, I feel like, speaking of the title of the podcast, he has a lot to prove this year. For many reasons, like you just said, the top 100 list alone shows that I think he still doesn't get quite the respect he deserves around the league. Like you said, there was 13 quarterbacks who made the top 100 and he wasn't on there, and I think that's pretty disgraceful. You got guys like Josh Allen and Kirk Cousins on there, and no Wentz. Even Ryan Tannehill made it, for crying out loud. So, I mean, I think it's pretty sad.
That's weird.
I think the biggest thing that maybe doubters see is he's kind of had, some injury issues throughout the last few years since he's been in the league, and I think that's kind of been something that is shaking him. Not to mention having his MVP year in 2017 being cut short to injury, and then having Nick Foles come in and win the Super Bowl for the Eagles. I think it's just kind of like, I'm sure he was super happy for Foles, but in the back of his mind, he's thinking like, man, F that guy. Like, so I think as a competitor, he's probably, I'm sure that eats at him all the time. And he just wants to prove to everyone that he can go to the playoffs and win the big game himself. And finally last year, he gets a chance to go to the playoffs. And then sure enough, he has to leave the game with a concussion. So it's just kind of been a tough time for him. But I think, last year he proved, he could play all 16 games, granted the playoffs happened. But I think the injuries he's had have kind of been fluke injuries. It's not like it's been a consistent injury every year. So I feel like, this year, if everyone stays healthy, I think that he has a big opportunity to kind of show a lot of people, hey, what he can do, with a full year and a healthy squad. You can never rely on health, but I think with that, speaking of last year, he had no one and he still took the team to the playoffs in that last 4-game stretch where he kind of just took over. So yeah, it's just been an up and down road for him so far. But I think, because of all the things I mentioned, I think he's got a huge chip on his shoulder, and he wants to prove a lot of people wrong, because clearly there's still a lot of people around the league who don't think highly of him, or just don't think he's maybe in that elite class. So yeah, that's what I got.
So do you guys have Wentz on this list too? I mean, Drew and Vargy? I mean,
if it was my top 100.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. I mean, same. The guy's good. I mean, the guy. If you look at the tape, you look at the numbers. He's one of the highest rated quarterbacks. So it's definitely in it for me. Yeah.
Cool. Me too. Obviously. Look, Wentz is elite in situational football. Red zone, third downs, top 10 in air yards. And that's a big deal. They're like, oh, air yards, you didn't get those completions. Look, I don't know how he got 4K, to be honest with you. 4,000 yards passing seems like a give me that everyone should get. But come on, if you're playing basketball and you're playing half-court offense all the time and you can only score half-court offense, no fast breaks, not even a secondary break, it's hard. So that's more than one quarterback. But we're talking about Wentz right now. It was also Tom Brady last year as well. They didn't have anyone to stretch the field. They're not just dinking and dunking. They were trying to stretch the field with whoever they had. That's why both TB12 was also top 10 in air yards as well. They were trying to move the ball. So, yeah, like even if the best tight end duo may be in Philadelphia, they're different. It's different. You're getting 4 yards, 8 yards, 12 yards, maybe an occasional 16, 18-yarder. But it's not too frequent. So that's tough, just being the quarterback of a team that's kind of limited. So that's why I kind of, not just Wentz, but quarterbacks in general, they're always going to be behind the 8 ball. So I'm not going to give them too much credit all the time, but I'm not going to be the first one to down them either, especially not Wentz. This guy, 27 TDs to 7 picks. I mean, he's the only quarterback in the league last year to throw a touchdown in every single game. That's saying something. Maybe stats aren't everything, but to me, he's a top 3 talent, probably top 5 in toughness. I mean, he's been efficient, and he has flashy plays, so I think it's kind of a hard player not to like, but he's polar for some reason. He's missed 5 games, then 3 games, and he's played 2 complete seasons. Paul, you mentioned knocked out last year in the playoffs. That's not injury prone. You get hit in the back of the head. How does that add to an injury prone label? I don't know. I mean, we've all only played sports and we know what injury prone is. If you're pulling your hamstring all the time, that's injury prone, or your groin. It is what it is. It's not the case here. And there's been players that missed more games than Carson Wentz since he entered the league. Deshaun Watson, Cam Newton, Matthew Stafford. And then if you look at other positions, Tyrann Mathieu, I mean, he started his career his first 4 years missing games. He missed 5 games, 10 games, 2 games, 6 games. Past 3 seasons, he's played 16 games. No longer labeled injury prone. I think that's what's happened to Matthew Stafford. I think that's what's in store for Carson Wentz. And spin it around a little bit. Pat Mahomes MVP 2 years ago, Super Bowl MVP this past season. He missed a couple games. If he misses a couple more games this year and or next year, there's going to be a little bit of a label on Patrick Mahomes. That just is what it is. Aaron Rodgers misses time. It happens. Jimmy G, he played his first full season this past year. Make the Super Bowl as a team, but look, football ain't easy. I don't like labeling anybody injury prone, whether they're on my favorite team, my biggest rival. I'm just a football fan. I mean, I think it's crazy that the amount of polarity Carson Wentz has become in the league. I think he's clearly top 3 player in the league with things to prove. So I'm glad he threw him on this list, Paul. Do you guys think I'm being biased here at all when I'm speaking about Carson Wentz?
I don't think so. I mean, as far as the numbers go, yeah, you can judge a quarterback based off of stats, but stats alone, it'll tell a story. It's just not the whole story. But if you're an Eagles fan or if you're watching teams that are on the rise, you could just put together and compile, look at what this guy's doing with the help that he's received. I mean, the receivers, the tight ends, the running game, the defense giving up all those points too. They had secondary issues as well. So he's always in a shootout. It's clear to see that Doug Peterson has all the confidence in the world putting him out on the field and still having him, like you said, I mean, with that supporting cast, he still threw 27 touchdowns, 7 picks. And even with all those issues, he was still favored in the playoff game against the
Seahawks.
Against the Seahawks. So, I mean, to have all of that on a 1-year resume, and on another hand, one thing I always talk about too when we talk about players is the eye test. I mean, if you take a look at Carson Wentz as a whole, game by game, year by year, yes, there's some games that he's missed, but when he's on the field, I mean, you cannot deny his desire to win, his desire to be coached, his desire to, he's a magnetic guy. You can tell that his teammates will play hard for him, but he makes things happen. I mean, you're talking arm power, arm angles, 3rd downs, 4th downs, and he's a mobile quarterback. You can't say that for everybody in this league to have all of those assets in their back pocket. So, I mean, not being on the top 100 list, that's got to be crazy.
I mean, I think Carson Wentz. I mean, I think we all know what kind of player he is. Like these guys mentioned, you know, the facts are there. I think his case is more of a perception. thing than numbers kind of thing, you know. Unfortunately for him, he got stuck, you know, with an injury, and the guy who just came to replace him just won the team a championship. So that's a very unique situation he was caught up in. And I think, you know, obviously Philadelphia is super hardcore. Their fans are some of the craziest fans out there. I mean, not necessarily you guys, but I mean, I've watched some things and I'm like, dude, these guys are super, super fans. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm a fan, but these guys are like, this is their life. And I think the perception is with him, obviously, is, you know, this backup came in, he took your job, and he won your team a championship. And I think that obviously plays against him. So I don't think this has anything to do with Carson Wentz as his ability to play the quarterback position. It has more to do with the perception of, hey, you know, it's obviously he was hurt last year. He had a concussion issue before. So I think people get caught up in that whole Nick Foles situation, even though it might have passed. You know, I think until another championship comes from him, unfortunately, you know, that's going to be the perception of him. But I think Carson Wentz is, like I said, he's an elite quarterback in my book, and you know, that's how I feel about the situation there.
Good to hear. Good stuff. And do we have another quarterback on this list, Drew?
We do. Yeah, the guy that I had on my list was Phillip Rivers. Especially all of us here being in San Diego, he's on TV with those games a lot. And I know what everyone's going to say. You know, most people are going to say those turnovers need to come down. And I agree. It's true. But, I mean, you're looking at since 2015, he threw 76 interceptions, a total of 88 giveaways. I mean, those numbers definitely do have to come down. But when I look at things as a whole, I don't think it's always on him. Phillip Rivers, over the span of his career, since he took over the starting job his third year, he was always one of the top guys as far as QB rating and completion percentage. So Phillip Rivers with a 65% completion percentage, that's usually you're having these elite guys around 60 to 62%. So you got to give him some credit there. He's 12th in wins. He's 7th on the completion percentage list. He's 6th in yards and 6th in touchdowns. So now we know he's going to Indy. He's going to be taking over behind center. And, I mean, he's primed as a starter to pass a lot of Dan Marino stats too. And they're not just little stats. There are a lot of major categories. So starting this year, hopefully playing 16 games, knowing Phillip Rivers not missing a game, he's going to play all 16 of those games. So he's actually going to undeniably pass him in completions, yards, and touchdowns. So for as much as people talk about Dan Marino being a great quarterback, Hall of Fame quarterback, I mean, that puts him pretty high on the list. He still has it in him. I mean, over the past couple of years, if you don't count 2019, I mean, he still threw 23 touchdowns last year, 20 picks on the other side of it. But before that, he had a touchdown of 32, touchdown to interception ratio from 32 and 12. And then he also had before that 28 to 10. I mean, watching this guy every week, being here in San Diego, he's the ultimate competitor. There's almost no guy like him in the league. A lot of the quarterbacks are kind of just lax and have a good time, dance on the field kind of thing. But he's a guy that'll get in your face. He needs that much. He needs that to win. He needs that W on his side. And he'll do whatever it takes to get that W too. He's not afraid to throw down the field. You know, he's not a game managing quarterback. He's going to do whatever it takes to win on the field. But the thing that I always hate most is he's dealt with a lot of subpar performances on the offensive line forever too. So, you know, according to Pro Football Focus, his O-line pass blocking grade last year was number 29 in the league. You know, out of 32 teams, obviously. They had the second highest amount of pressures allowed last year. But over the past 6 years, Pro Football Focus hasn't graded their O-line over 26. So you're talking about 26 and worse. You know, we always talk about football being a camaraderie sport. It's a team sport. So he definitely needs a support system. We've seen a lot of teams support, you know, quarterbacks now that are having a lot of success. They're protecting the asset. They're protecting their investment, the quarterback. They're going to surround him with elite talent, but not just talent. Who's on the coaching side too? You got Mahomes. You got the offensive genius in Andy Reid. He has weapons. He has protection. Dak Prescott. He has a lot of offensive coaches. He has the weapons. He has the protection. I'm not saying Phillip Rivers is like Mahomes or even Dak Prescott or Deshaun Watson or Carson Wentz. those mobile talents or just young talents. But I mean, I think we're just getting a little bit more harsh, a little too harsh. Like, where's his offensive genius self? Where's his protection help? Now that they have one of the best offensive rankings preseason going into this 2020 season, he's gone. You know, so was it just kind of like a non-mesh with coaches and the quarterback, or you know, who knows what really is? But based off of all that, I think he actually has it now. You know, him and Frank Reich, they've been married before. They were together in San Diego from 2013 to 2015. Through those years, Rivers actually had his best completion years. So his career average was around 350 completions per year. He reached 437 in one time, his third year with Frank Reich. So during that stint, he also had his best completion year, 70%. 70% is a huge completion number. Like, that's numbers that Tom Brady doesn't reach, Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson. That's only a Drew Brees thing. So with all the scrutiny since 2019, playing for the Chargers, I think he's trying to be comeback player of the year.
Oh, holy cow. Okay. All right. Well, I'm mostly with you on that. He's going from overall the third worst O-line in the league to the first. And even if the Colts don't remain at number one, they're still elite, just like you said, man. You're spot on with the numbers, but overall comparisons, his numbers, his highs and his lows and his median, they're very comparable before Frank Reich, during Frank Reich, after Frank Reich. When they were together, they went 9-7, 9-7, 4-12. So one thing Rivers does have going for him, Jacoby Brissett, whether he has a future and gets another chance as a starter or not, he threw the second most uncatchable passes in the league. That's rough. I mean, but he was the only starter to finish last. The team that had more uncatchable passes was the Panthers, that threw three different quarterbacks in last year. So, I mean, they can only improve, you would think. They do have weapons, like you said, but my biggest drawback, in 8 of his 14 years as a starter, he's ranked top 10 in interceptions, 5 times in the top 5. That's a lot. Sounds like Eli Manning to me. I like Phillip Rivers. We live here. You know, we root for the guy, even though I'm not specifically a Chargers fan. I live here. Why not root for him? I know you guys are in the same boat. He's in the best possible situation. I think it was the most predictable off-season signing that there was, and for good reason. Comeback player of the year, that can happen. I'm not going to bet on that like you, Drew, but it can happen. Best scenario for him. And it's all set up for the Colts and for Rivers to make the playoffs and to succeed and have a good year. I see it. I get it. I'm just questioning Rivers individually here rather than the sum of the parts. Vargy, I mean, what do you think about Rivers coming up?
I'm kind of in the same boat as you are. I think Rivers, like you said, he's a fiery guy. I would love to have him on my team. I think he's had his runs with the teams that he's been on, and which have been some great teams. You know, obviously it's not all his fault. It doesn't all fall on him. But I think as a quarterback, you know, a lot of times that is going to fall on you. So in this case, I've seen games, you know, I think it was last year where we saw him just throw it into like quadruple coverage, you know, and back-to-back picks or something like that. And that's to win a game, you know. So I feel like he's kind of – I think he like Wes mentioned, I think he's in the best possible situation. I don't see him doing much better, especially with a new team. He still has to get, you know, familiar with everybody, feel comfortable. But I root for the guy, and I hope he does. I hope he has comeback player of the year.
Paul?
Yeah, I kind of see it similarly. You know, he's had an interesting career, definitely. You know, he's been on a lot of good teams with the Chargers over the years. You know, I think one year they went 14-2 with Marty Schottenheimer, and then they always ran into that buzzsaw with the Patriots with Tom Brady. Because, you know, it's a tough – because I think he has the traits to be a Super Bowl winning quarterback. He just hasn't got there yet. Because like you just said, you compared him to Eli Manning. Eli Manning's got 2 Super Bowls, and that alone will probably get him in the Hall of Fame, whereas Rivers might be on the fence because of that. And like for Eli, all it takes is that one magical run where they weren't even that good that year. They were like 9-7, and the miracle catch. So it just there's a lot of crazy shit that happens in the league. But I think the biggest thing is just I really feel like him more than anyone we might name today needed a change of scenery, just because playing his whole career
Absolutely.
there and then always coming up short, and then they always have that choke label where they kind of always throw away games. They play down to their competition some weeks, and then they against the good teams they play well, and then they choke it out at the end. It's just so he's had some rough goes at it, but I really think the biggest thing for him, like you guys have mentioned, is the switch to having to see what he would do with actual good offensive line, because I think a lot of those I think he's a really smart guy, and when he has time in the pocket, he can take care of the ball really well and throw accurate balls, and he's actually a really good deep ball thrower too. So I feel like a lot of the interceptions he had last year were just the result of being rushed in the pocket because, like you said, he didn't have a good O-line. So just from seeing him play, I mean, he doesn't have that escapability. He's not going to be able to move out of the pocket. So instead of taking a sack, he's more of a risk taker, So you say, hey, he leads the league and he's always top in interceptions. Well, so was Brett Favre, It's just like, doesn't mean he was the worst quarterback. I think it's just sometimes it's just the situation he's in, and he's rushing it, and maybe he shouldn't. He should just take a sack sometimes, but he's just such a competitor that sometimes he just likes to air it out. So I'm not as confident as Drew with the comeback player of the year, but I am very interested to see what he'll do with a good offensive line. I definitely expect the turnovers to go way down this year.
I mean, I'm willing to bet you guys will side towards Drew's offense or comeback player of the year more than mine, because mine he's not in this conversation, but just to let you know, mine's probably Todd Gurley. So I'm pretty sure you three would all go with Phillip Rivers over Todd Gurley if those were your 2 options. Am I right?
Not necessarily. I mean, for me, honestly, I would go with Todd Gurley. I would say, I think for him too, I think he kind of needed that change of scenery too, from what it seems, from what I follow up on what he's doing in the off season. For some reason, he's always around, now that he's in Atlanta, he's around all those like rapper dudes. So I get to see a lot of his interactions, and he's excited, man. He's excited. He seems pumped about the season. He seems pumped about the team. And sometimes that's all you need as a player. I mean, we know he's talented, and yeah, he had some injuries, but I think a lot of times, these guys have played with injuries all their lives. So I think sometimes you pick and choose with injury. You're, it hurts this time. When your attitude and your motivation isn't there, I think a good change of scenery will do the trick. So I'm with you on Todd Gurley.
Cool. And Drew, it sounds like you're all in on Rivers, still able to get it done individually, but he couldn't overcome the culture, I guess, the franchise in San Diego and LA.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely opportunities for winning seasons, and I mean, the guy's been in numerous playoff games as well. It's just the only thing that I saw was it's like everyone chose to badmouth his play based off of 2019 or his decision making. But if I were Phillip Rivers and watching him since 2004, you could just say that, hey, I mean, when you're put in a situation and it's the 4th quarter, and you need to make plays happen, and nothing's been going right for you, and you've had pressure in your face, I mean, you have to give your receivers opportunity. It wasn't always that case. I mean, there was definitely some questionable throws down the field or in traffic, but that's just the guy that Phillip is. Just like Paul mentioned, you got Brett Favre throwing the most interceptions for a guy that's in the Hall of Fame. I mean,
gunslingers.
It's the same mentality. He's going to do something to make it happen. He's either going to lose you the game or he's going to win you the game. It's not like he's trying to lose the game, obviously, but that just puts him up there in the upper echelon of upper fiery competitors. So he's competing every second, whether there's 4 quarters left to play, or where there's 4 seconds left to play, he's going to give someone an opportunity to win. But that change of scenery, like I said, I mean, learning the playbook is going to be easy. He did it long enough with Frank Wright for a good stint. He's going to be that veteran guy that team is going to look to. He has one of the top-rated offensive lines. I think Pro Football Focus has them coming into the season as number 3. That drafting Jonathan Taylor, Marlon Mack is not some pushover back. I mean, Naheem Hines did get great on third downs. So they have a lot of capable backs. They have capable weapons. I mean, don't forget about Ohio State's Paris Campbell. He was set to be one of the nice breakout candidates for that year too. And I mean, they have enough on the defensive side to at least keep him in games. I just think it won't be all on his shoulders. It's just kind of stretch feet for Phillip Rivers to kind of let it win on the team aspect.
And here's a fantasy sleeper, Trey Burton at tight end. If you don't know, now you know. All right. Vargy, who you got, man, at the quarterback position that has some things to prove this year?
Well, obviously, Mr. Contract, Dak Prescott. I obviously this guy has so much to prove. I think obviously we've seen he's been okay. For the team we have as a Cowboy fan, for myself, I feel like he could be a lot better in the decisions he makes. And in last year's team, it felt like he kind of was that weak link. Obviously, our offensive line was a little injured, but for him to demand the kind of contract that he's demanding, you got a little bit more proving to do. In the sense, because the guys who are already getting that kind of money, those guys are proven. Those guys have put up the numbers, have won the games. For us, we haven't won a playoff game in a long time. I believe in 1996 is we won a playoff game. But actually, I'm sorry, we just won a playoff game. Didn't we just win a playoff? Sorry, confused. No.
You talking about against the Rams or the Seahawks recently?
Yeah. I gotta look it up. But yeah, man, I think Dak definitely has a lot to prove this year. Especially with him wanting a new contract. You gotta play. You gotta pick up your play for sure. You gotta make those decisions. And I mean, we'll see this year. This is the year to do it. You're getting paid a lot of money to be a Cowboy, the Cowboys quarterback. I mean, I know you guys are not the biggest Cowboy fans, but that franchise still carries that name. And so, we need him to step up this year, and, I hope he does well. I think the problem with him is I feel like the Cowboys aren't giving him the money that he wants, obviously, for his play. But I also feel like it's because we know Jerry Jones is a showman. He's a showman. He wants to have a show in Dallas. He wants action. He wants to – I mean, that's why he paid Tony. Tony Romo was – I mean, he came from Eastern Kentucky.
Underrated.
Yeah, the guy got paid because he made plays. He made the game exciting. And, I mean, that's what Jerry wants. I feel like Jerry, at the end of the day, he's bringing a product to you, and he wants that to be the most exciting product. And Dak Prescott's not necessarily that quarterback. I mean, he can run the ball, but he rarely chooses to. He's not flashy, but he does the job. And I think for him to get a contract from Jerry, he's going to have to show a lot more than he did last year, obviously. And so we'll see. We'll see what he does.
That's tough, man. Tough. Paul, what do you think, man?
Obviously, I'm an Eagles fan, so I love to hate the Cowboys, but I actually like Dak a lot. I think he's a really good quarterback. He's coming into the league, and even from his rookie year, if you look at the last 4 years, he's got a really good team record, over that time, and he's been durable. He consistently ranks top 5, 10 in QBR every year since he's been in the league. So, he can put up the numbers. He takes care of the ball pretty well for the most part. I just think he's just come up short in some big games. I think he's really good against lesser competition. He really takes advantage of those games. And I think against tougher competition, he hasn't always shown up to the plate. So I think that's his biggest issue so far, because, he's got all the support in the world right now, because that team's stacked on offense. They got a really, top 5 offensive line. They got one of the best backs in the league. They're going to have, probably one of the best top 3 wide receivers in the league of any team, so he's got all the weapons in the world, and like Vargas said, I mean, this is his contract year. He's trying to prove that he's worth that big contract, and I think he set up perfectly this year to do it. So I mean, there's no excuses for him this year, as long as they have good health and everything like that. The biggest downfall might be their defense, if they can hold up, because I think they're gonna struggle this year. So he's gonna definitely have to carry some more of the burden this year to make sure he earns that contract. Because I think the biggest thing, like for me, I feel like he's just teetering on the edge of being a franchise quarterback and not. And I think that's kind of where the Dallas front office is too, is they just, they don't know he's so close to being that franchise, but then some games it just doesn't look like he's there. And obviously if he wants Patrick Mahomes money, that's not going to happen. So, I'm sure they're trying to find some middle ground where he makes closer to what Goff and Wentz got, but obviously inflation, that was a couple of years ago. So, maybe he gets a little more, but yeah, like I said, everything's in front of him this year to have no excuses this year.
It's true. And I think the Cowboys are smart. They got a comparable alternative in Andy Dalton. A guy that can do a lot of the same things on the field. Whether, that's their version of a handcuff reality football. They got a backup quarterback, arguably the best backup quarterback in football now. They got someone that can come in for injury, someone that can come in if Dak holds out or if they move on from Prescott. They're not married to either of these guys, but they have that type of quarterback. They don't have to change a thing if anything came about Prescott not being on the field for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
The contract situation, it came out exactly how I thought it'd play out. Franchise tag, no deal coming down. It's what I thought would happen. And I even felt more assurance that this would happen when Jason Garrett was let go, because the new coach would come in. Why would he want to commit to a quarterback that soon? So it all makes sense. It adds up. You look at Dak's 4 seasons, they won 13 games, 9 and 10 with him throwing for less than 4,000 yards. Last year, first-time OC, Kellen Moore, they got pass happy, man. He throws for nearly 5K. They go 8-8. And look, Kellen Moore, good for him. The offense looked good. It's a team game, though. You got to play both sides of the ball. And if you're leaving your defense out to dry, when your bread and butter and making the playoffs the previous 2-3 years was Zeke, O-line, exactly, Drew, and milking the clock, getting first downs, keeping your defense off the field, and it worked. It was the recipe they needed, and it's what they got away from. And I don't know how much better they're going to be with Mike McCarthy, to be honest. Everyone wants to point at Jason Garrett. Well, he's out of town now. He had a top 5 offense in all major categories. Their defense was actually top 12 in all major categories besides forcing turnovers. I didn't see the Cowboys fix that. So they go CeeDee Lamb to replace Randall Cobb. That's awesome, but offense wasn't your problem. Offense is not the reason the Dallas Cowboys missed the playoffs. Maybe the play calling was, because it left the defense out to dry that didn't have the talent to match their offense. You can't play Chiefs football when you're not getting turnovers like the Chiefs got turnovers. That was the difference. They're not a sensational defense in KC, but they were opportunistic. They got Mahomes the ball back. Drew, all 3 of us, well, actually, Paul and Vargy, I think, are teetering on whether Dak's a franchise guy. I think he's a franchise quarterback. I just have him as a top of tier 3, back of tier 2, with top of tier 2 moments. And sometimes Sometimes. Because when you're playing this game and you're at this level, you're gonna have higher moments. You're gonna be awesome. Sometimes Dak Prescott has back of tier 1 moments. Those are more fewer and far between. But do you think, like me, that Dak's a franchise guy, or you agree with these guys that you really don't know?
Out of the games that I've seen, as far as Dak being a franchise quarterback, I think that's at 100% yes. They're just kind of flirting with. It's always uncomfortable to talk about money, especially when it's the highest paid guy in the room. But one of the things that came into factor, looking at this season, at first we didn't know if there was going to be an NFL season. Who knows if they're going to have fans in the stadium? Each team is looking to lose anywhere from 70 million or more. Especially a team as highly coveted like the Dallas Cowboys in a brand new stadium. Theirs has to be at least in the 100 million or higher. So I think they're taking that into fact. But it's kind of like, after this pandemic, as far as salary cap goes too, we all know that Jerry pays players. He just paid a few. Others he had to let go. And like you said, it's not the offense that was hurting, it was the defense. On a couple of the episodes that we had before, we talked about them losing Robert Quinn. DeMarcus Lawrence is their prized possession, but Robert Quinn was their sack leader last year. They lost him. They lost Byron Jones, who's one of the most talented corners in the league, athletically and mentally. They lost him to a big contract with the Dolphins. A couple of bigger pieces that they didn't yet fill. You could say they kind of filled them. They brought over HaHa Clinton-Dix to cover Jeff Heath's spot. But you're talking about some of the pieces and building something like a puzzle piece, just throwing things here or there, hoping it works out for a season where you're not going to have that many OTAs or preseason. You're just going to be thrown right into the mix. So, yes, franchise quarterback, I think is just a big-time money issue because the salary cap is really based off of revenue. And with the league taking a big hit in revenue after this pandemic, Jerry is kind of doing a smart business thing, not giving him the contract that he wants. If he's going to sign him, he wants him long-term and guaranteed, but Dak wants shorter years because obviously he's not sure of his position or the lovely marriage that they're going to hold over the next few years. He wants that opportunity to possibly see an organization in the future as well. One of the Cowboys reporters, James Slater, he reported that just hours before the deadline to sign on the dotted line for the contract, Dak and his team actually went back to the Cowboys organization trying to renegotiate. So you can kind of tell maybe it was just a little bit of bad advice from him not signing that contract, but something was said between those last few hours to where maybe he was like, you know what? The money looks good to me. I was making nothing before. I have an opportunity right now to make this kind of money, let alone the endorsement money that you're getting for wearing the star. That has to cover for a lot of it too. And, the reason I would take him is because he does a lot of things right off the field too. You can't really look at these games and always blame it on Dak Prescott. We talked about Jason Garrett. A lot of those games, honestly, was just more of third down options, fourth down. Situational football is a big thing, and a lot of defensive pressure. So, as far as looking at what he brings to the table, I can't say that I'm not going to sign Dak because out of all the contracts that have been signed, maybe not Tannehill's, I would agree with. Anything other than Tannehill's contract, you can't say that these quarterbacks are not earning their money. Kirk Cousins, with all of the disrespect for Kirk Cousins, he's earning that money. You know what I mean? Statistically, and everyone always votes him as a team captain too. So with all the men in that room putting their bodies on the line, voting someone team captain, like they do with Dak, that says a lot in my book too.
Agreed. Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the final quarterback on this list here. What was that, dude?
Plus, he has the Campbell's Chunky Soup going for him.
Man, they had all off season to talk contract. Jerry was pulling his leg at the end. You know that.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing too. I feel like if you really wanted to get that done, when you really want a quarterback, as soon as the Chiefs were able to sign Mahomes, they fucking signed him. I'm sorry.
Exactly.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
They signed him, So to me, it's more of, Jerry. Obviously, he's playing the field, like you said. He's being smart. I like Dak. I guess I don't see him in the same light because I watched every game last year, and I love his play. His awareness is not all there for him to be, in my book, a number one quarterback. So, and that's huge, So
Agreed with that. All good points there. And then shifting to the last quarterback on this list, my guy here, I think Matthew Stafford has a ton to prove. Look, he started all 16 games for 8 straight seasons. Kudos, man. That's tough to do. He did that. Then last year happened where he only played half the year. I like Stafford a lot. That's why I picked him. I think he can guide the Lions to the postseason this year. You guys know that. I think they're gonna sneak in. Doesn't mean he still doesn't have to go on the field, prove it, win those games. I can think whatever I want. He still got to put it up. So he may be in that tier 2 with a guy we talked about, Phillip Rivers, which is very good. So there's nothing wrong with that. You can win with those guys. I just think he's a better player than Rivers, than Matt Ryan, who won an MVP. I think he has something more in him. It's hard with a franchise that doesn't have a winning culture. I get it. I do. The signs are there. The Lions, they're usually an afterthought. Matthew Stafford, when talking quarterbacks, he's kind of an afterthought too. But in those 8 seasons he's played so far, they have an 11-5 year in there, a 10-6 year as a rookie, a 9-7 record twice. And they only made the playoffs once with those 4 records. Above 500, only made the playoffs once. And we see teams all the time with 9 wins and 10 wins make the playoffs every year. So, I mean, if you're a Lions fan, that's a tough pill to swallow. Unfortunately, it's a reality. All that matters is the result. Doesn't matter how many wins you get if you didn't get in the tournament. But just want to bring that to light because it is a team game. It ain't just on the QB like we talked about these other few quarterbacks. And then, look, individually, he's going to throw for 4K every year. He had 1 year with 5K. His last 4 seasons, his completion percentage is between 65 and 67. Awesome. He's doing his thing. He threw 41 touchdowns before as a rookie. His best TD to interception ratio, 29-10 and 32-13. Those are Russell Wilson comparable numbers, and that's an annual MVP candidate every year, Russell Wilson. He might win it at some point. Conversation for another day, though, because he hasn't won one, and I actually question whether Russell will ever win one. But back to Stafford, similar numbers. Man, he's not far behind. Even if Russell picked up his game the last 2 years, Stafford doesn't have to be that. And we know he's not that with mobility. Doesn't have to be. He's been pretty damn good in the pocket. He scrambles between 20 and 40 times a season, so he's not a complete statue back there. Even when we're talking about O-line, the past 5 years, I'm excluding last season because it was only half a year. Past 5 years, that O-line, they gave up 37 to 45 sacks. That's going to take a lot out of your body, mentally, physically. That's just tough. Not making an excuse for anybody. It's just the truth. No one looked at the Lions as a model franchise. Their O-line hasn't been good until last year. But he got hurt. They actually improved. Pro Football Focus, the Lions O-line was ranked 11th, top third of the league. And we know their weapons, Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones, we talked about him before. They combined for 20 touchdowns last season with backup quarterbacks. They have a nice backfield tandem, DeAndre Swift, Kerryon Johnson. I love TJ Hawkinson at tight end. They have the weapons. I like Matt Patricia. I think their defense has a lot of solid players that can complement the offense, so that's why I'm thinking playoffs for the Lions. I see the signs being there for the Lions, for Stafford individually. I get the frustration. There was actually talk about possible trade block for Stafford, which clearly hasn't happened, and it won't with this unique offseason. But, I mean, look, I think QB position is one that you can develop every year, just like any position. The little details, the specifics, like Tom Brady says, the tendency breakers. I think Matthew Stafford has to show himself that. If I see that, other people have to see it. He's got to know it a little bit. I think Stafford has a lot to prove. Do you have him as an elite quarterback? Do you think he'll ever be elite? Do you think he is what he is and he's closer to average than good? Drew?
I mean, no one's going to deny his arm talent. He has one of the biggest arms in the NFL. And like you said, he does put up numbers. Nobody thinks of the Lions as an unstoppable passing offense, an unstoppable running offense. Can't score in their D, but the only highlight based off of the Lions' years since Stafford's been in there is Matthew Stafford. So if they continue to build a little bit like what we talked about before, a supporting cast, I think he definitely has the tools. I mean, he already has the weapons on offense, and maybe he just needs a little bit more help on the defensive side. But I mean, they definitely add a lot of players to fill those positions, like pass rusher. They drafted a first-round corner. Ohio State, we know, produces some of the best corners in the league. So Jeff Okudah should just fit in right nicely with Matt Patricia. But I just think it's that little step above, and I don't know if it's a front office thing, if it's an organization thing, or it's just players and coaches that just don't want to go there because it is the Lions and their history. But I don't think it's always on Matt Stafford because if you ask me, he's the only highlight they've had since he's been in the league on that team.
I think I might have talked myself out of Todd Gurley and into Matthew Stafford for comeback player of the year. Well, what do you guys think about Stafford? Oh, actually, real quick, Drew, Stafford or Rivers?
Rivers.
All right. What do you guys think of Stafford?
He only played 8 games. It's not his fault he only played 8. You know what I mean? You got to have some kind of backing. It's not like, he was – I mean, I'm only saying that because Rivers was getting talked at as the worst. He's washed up. Offseason, don't even think about his starting position. Be the backup to Dak Prescott just in case that contract doesn't go through. I mean, come on, man. Those are just hurtful things. This guy, he's got a lot. He knows he has a lot to prove. If anyone's going to push further, it's going to be Phillip Rivers himself.
Paul, what do you got, man, on Stafford?
I've always really liked Stafford. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he's the kind of quarterback you can get to the playoffs with. I just don't see him as that elite quarterback that can get you to the Super Bowl and win it. But yeah, I mean, he's kind of had a rough deal. I mean, like coming into a franchise like that, or just the history of losing and, first pick and kind of the savior. And, it's just been constant turmoil since he's been there. I mean, I love the days of him and Calvin Johnson back in the day. I mean, It was so fun to watch. Calvin Johnson's probably my favorite receiver of all time. I love that guy. But
I like that.
If he doesn't make the Hall of Fame, I'll be mad. But that's another story for another day.
He's in. He'll make it.
Yes.
But just some other things that maybe just to add on to what you guys said. You talked about the division a little bit. I mean, you're talking about a division with Minnesota, Green Bay, and Chicago. That's 3 storied franchises that are pretty good every year consistently. So not only are you coming in as the number 1 pick with the history of losing, but you're coming in trying to get to the playoffs, like you said, with their records they had. It's going to be tough to make it when you got that division that's pretty stacked usually most years. And most of them have good defenses every year too. So, I mean, he's kind of had the deck shut on him a little bit. So it's been tough. Also, they had the streak they had the longest streak for no running back over 100 yards for like over 2 seasons or something like that. So, I mean, the guy's never had a run game, or an O-line of any kind. So it's just, he's always kind of, I just love his attitude and the way he works, and he's competitive as hell. So, I mean, and not only that, but just to top it off, think about the coaching carousel he's been through since he's been in the league. How many coaches,
Right.
different head coaches has he had? At least over 5. Like the last few he's had, Matt Patricia, then it was Jim Caldwell, then it was Jim Schwartz. It's just guys that I don't even think are good coaches anyways. Like I'm not a big Matt Patricia fan. I think he's a good defensive guy, but I don't think he's going to help develop Stafford in any way, shape, or form. And then Jim Caldwell, I always thought was an overrated head coach. And then, Jim Schwartz, that was maybe his best years is when he's with Jim Schwartz, and that was when they made the playoffs. So yeah, I think just going through that many coaching changes, never having an O-line, never having a run game, it's just hurt his stock. And like you said, I think that's why he gets overlooked a lot, even though he's got all the talent in the world. And I think, like Drew said, if they can get some talent around him, I think they can definitely be a playoff team.
Damn. Vargas?
Yeah, I mean, that division is just tough, man. You naming off those teams, I'm just realizing that's probably one of the hardest divisions to be in, as a team. So I think Matthew Stafford is highly underappreciated. Like you guys mentioned, this guy's put up numbers, had a 5,000 yard season. He could have had another one last year if it wasn't for that, for what he was going through. But I mean, the guy's in Detroit, for God's sake. He's he's on a team in a city with that. Not a lot of optimism, not a lot of hope around there, and I think he's doing the best with what he was given. I love his attitude as well. I love every interview I watch with that guy. It's all about the team. It's never about him as an individual, and I love that about a quarterback. He's a natural leader, and I think that is huge in a quarterback. Obviously, that's something that you can't teach. So just for that reason, I'm very high. I've always been very high on Matthew Stafford. He can throw a deep ball. I mean,
hell yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So he's just. I think he's a tier 2 quarterback. I want to say a tier 1. He's a tier 2 quarterback, but I think he's highly underappreciated by just everybody in the NFL, maybe except Detroit
and us, I guess.
Yeah.
Hey, real quick,
grape through a battleship.
Yeah. Damn.
Hey,
real
natural
quick.
Born leader, Dak Prescott.
Hey, Drew. You go first. Rank the 4 quarterbacks we just talked about. Wentz, Prescott, Rivers, Stafford.
That's the order right there.
Wentz, Prescott, Rivers, Stafford.
That is.
Paul?
Yeah, I got Wentz and Prescott 1 and 2. I think I got Stafford slightly over Rivers.
Yeah, so same. I got 1 and 2 the same. Prescott on the 2, and then I would say I'm going to take Rivers at 3, just because I believe that. I think, like you said, as much as he's thrown all these picks, the guy's still he's made some incredible plays, and I think he's a Hall of Famer in my book. I mean, the guy maybe doesn't have the championships, but I mean, just the games that he's grinded out, I think, and the teams he's been on. I mean, they're historic. So I'm going to go with Rivers and then Matthew Stafford on that one.
All right. And I got Carson Wentz, Matthew Stafford, Dak Prescott, then Phillip Rivers. Not based on career, based on today. Doesn't mean they're not good. They're on this list for a reason. So, all right, Vargas, since you kind of alluded to it, we know what you think. I don't think Rivers is a Hall of Famer. What about you two?
I got it. I think he's in. Just the how long he's played, the numbers he's put up. He's been on a lot of winning teams. I think I always compare him to Eli Manning because of the draft and things like that. And Eli's got his Super Bowls, but
and the picks.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think he's better than Eli in any sense of the word. So I just think if you look at the quarterbacks that have made the Hall of Fame before him, and then just looking at who will get in, I think you can't take the Super Bowls away from him. I think he's been consistently good for a long time. He's definitely have some years where he throws more picks than others, but he's never had a year where it's just like completely off the rails. So he's been pretty damn consistent, even though the record might not always show it. But I feel like with his body of work, I don't think it's a slam dunk, but I think he should be in.
Drew?
It's hard to say because knowing that the Hall of Fame voting is a plethora of, writers and all that. There's a lot of different ways that you can win the Hall of Fame or be voted into the Hall of Fame. I think he makes it, deservedly so, but I don't think he makes it first ballot. I think it'll take a couple of rounds depending on how the quarterback carousels go over the next few years. and who's voted in first or second ballot. It's kind of a seesaw for me. I think at the end of the day, when I put his career into a whole, I think he does deserve to be in, but not first ballot. I think he squeaks in a few years after.
Fair enough. I think he gets in. I just wouldn't vote him in. Basically, what I meant. I don't think the Hall of Fame is for the very good, and that's what Phillip Rivers is to me. And I challenge anyone watching this, you guys, even myself in the future, to go look up every year of Phillip Rivers' career and see how many times you think he was a top 5 quarterback. I think more times than not, you would say he's not in that top 5. That's not Hall of Fame to me. It's just not. I like him. I'm rooting for the guy. I had no reason not to. And keep making that money for those kids, man.
What is he on, number 12 now?
17.
The words come from?
Real life books, television.
Yeah, and you just skim them and start including.
No, man, when I'm working, I hear them, and I just throw them down.